Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Ethan Cole, and this is an opportunity to shine the spotlight on some of the exceptional technology leaders we have as part of the LA community in an unedited, one take organic conversation. With us today on this episode, we have Sumeet Rana. Really excited to have you on the show today, Sumeet.
Thank you, Ethan. I'm really excited as well. And thank you for having this and having me on the show.
All right. Yeah, this is going to be going. I'm excited. But first, a word from our sponsors. We're brought to you by Unita. Unita Club is the co-working space that sets itself apart. With locations in El Segundo, Manhattan Beach, and Hermosa, Unita is where creativity flourishes. Unlike traditional offices, they provide an inspiring environment where ideas can thrive and businesses can grow. With Unita, there's no hidden fees, flexible terms, options for dedicated offices, and unlimited access to conference rooms, a photo studio, and a podcast studio, much like this, plus standard and 3D printers, 24/7 access to any of their locations, and they're local champions who support neighborhood businesses, open their event spaces to nonprofits, and celebrate art, music, and culture. Join Unita Club and experience co-working like never before. Learn more at www.unita.club, UNITA.CLUB. We're also brought to you by the Product Managers Association Los Angeles, available at PMA.LA. They are the largest professional organization for product and designers in LA. With more than 3,000 members from over 500 companies, they host monthly meetups, organize the Product Leader Council, and have a mentorship program where they connect working product managers with students from underrepresented groups to help build a better and more diverse next gen. To learn more about PMA, go to pma.la. To learn more about the mentorship program, go to pma.la/mentorship. Our guest today is Sumeet Rana. He's the founder and CEO of Prodhub.ai, and his past roles have included Senior Director of Product Management at Expedia, Director of Product Management at Disney. He's held product roles at MyLife.com, Fox, and MySpace, and he was also a consultant on projects at AOL, Comcast, and AT&T. And one interesting fact you might learn about him by perusing his LinkedIn page is he holds a patent for system and method for prioritizing online relationships. Can you tell us a little bit more about that patent and how it came into fruition?
Sure. Well, first of all, the patent was filed. It's not granted yet.
Okay.
And
Those take a while. Yeah.
yeah, take a while. And I think the company is not pursuing it anymore.
Uh,
But I think it's one of the coolest things that we did back then. And it's a very interesting problem. The problem that we were trying to solve was how to bring all your important messages from important people that matter to you. I think the problem is still relevant.
and that was across platforms.
That was a cross
And this
platform.
was back in like 2012, right? This is like the early days of smartphones, the early days of the proliferation of text, email, the multi-channel messaging that world that we live in
That's
today.
right. And I think the problem is still very relevant
Yeah.
because even today, back then when we were talking about these problems, the issue was that if you go to one channel, and back then people used to use Facebook a lot,
Right.
and people used to use Twitter a lot, and then people use LinkedIn a lot,
Right.
and then at the same time you have patterns like Gmail, emails, SMS, and so on and so forth. So the CEO at that time had the vision of bringing all this together. Okay, what are we trying to solve with that? Well, the solution that you're trying to look for is one place for everything. That's what they were trying to go for. You don't go
Right.
to multiple different places. You have all your messages in one place. But while that solved one problem, or it was a hypothesis of solving a problem, it created another issue, which
Okay.
was too much of everything in one place. So now you have every single message coming from Facebook, every single message coming from Twitter, every single message from LinkedIn, and suddenly your inbox, your messaging explodes, right?
It's like, yeah, it's like the aggregation of all those small emails from across everything, or not even just emails, all those messages put into one inbox that are kind of stacked at first by time based, right? So it's
Absolutely.
like you could have a text message from someone, or you could have a LinkedIn mail from someone soliciting you for something, and then you could have like a personal email
Yeah.
all in one place. Okay.
Yeah, and think about it, right? Like even today, when we talk about certain patterns, I think even in Expedia also we've talked about this. That at the end of the day, a message is a message. At the end of the day, it's one-to-one communication or one-to-many communication. People are trying to reach to others, right? There are different methods or different modes or different nuances about how the message is delivered, But at the end of the day, a message is a message.
Right.
So now going back to the problem we had, and by the way, this is also a fact. I read a study back then. Somebody found out, it's a fun fact I would like to share, that on Facebook, on average, and this is a very old data, so obviously right now the data must have changed, but
Right.
when we were working on this, on average, a Facebook user has 500 friends.
Okay.
And if you have to guess, how many are your real friends?
I would guess it's probably like 5% of them,
Well,
maybe.
you're pretty close because the research said about 8% are your
Wow.
real friends.
Wow.
Everybody else is an acquaintance, you know them, is your neighbor, is someone who's maybe just interested in you. So, not your real friends, right? So, then effectively, if you have messages coming from 500 people, what you don't care about, it's going to flood your inboxes,
Yeah.
right? And then you multiply that 6 times, 7 times, depending on the number of channels you're adding. And
Right.
on average, a user has 2.5 channels of communication, an average user in US. So what we said was, okay, well, now we've built everything, we brought all the messages. How do you try to figure out what really matters, especially from people that matter to you? That's what the patent was about. So
Yeah.
we started looking at the signals, and there are very interesting ways you can do that. So for example, if you get look at your Gmail, if I look at all the Gmail messages that come to you, I can find out who are important people simply because you reply to those emails.
Right.
If there is a signal, for example, another
Yeah.
example from social media, you don't like every Facebook post. Why? Because not every Facebook post is interesting to you.
Right.
The post that you like, the post that you comment, the post that you share is much more important to you compared to a post that you don't interact with.
Right.
There was also a study that showed that a Facebook like is worth $2, a Facebook comment is worth $8, Facebook share is worth $16. And I'm talking about old data. This is not
Yeah,
new
yeah,
data,
yeah.
by
This is
the
back
way,
when Facebook
right?
was the social media
Right.
platform
But
before
it does
Instagram
show
was
you
big.
the insights, right? Depending on
Yeah.
the signals on how you interact with your social media or your communication message, you give a signal of what is important to you, and more importantly, who is important to you. So based on those signal, we could figure out how do we find priority messages, that is important messages, and how
Uh,
do we find people that matter to you. Now imagine this. You have a universal inbox where you're getting all your messages in one place. And then you have really a smart button that shows you the 15 messages of the day that matter to you from the 5 people you care about.
yeah.
That's powerful.
That's power, and then that's like prioritized to the people you care about, and then the other
Absolutely.
stuff is still there. You can like peruse it, but
Absolutely.
like right at the top, it's like, I see that as a growing challenge now. I think it was a challenge in 2012, but now it just feels like there's one challenge that I've come across is someone will message me and I'll be doing something else. I'll have to come back to it. I'm like, oh, where was that? Was that like, was it text? Was it LinkedIn? Was it
Absolutely.
Gmail? Yeah,
Absolutely.
was it Insta? Like it's hard to remember where the person, because you connected even with the same people across multiple channels, and sometimes they'll reach out to you for different things on different places. So that's
Absolutely.
awesome. Wow, it sounds like a very strong product background in this and thinking about these from a really interesting way. And thing about product folks is there was no school for us to go to when we got into it. So could you tell us a little bit more about your journey? How did you find yourself into product, and
Yeah.
especially at these different places you're at? Expedia,
Yeah.
Disney,
Yeah.
Fox,
So
for
I think
instance.
I think the probably the hands down the best product experience or the best experience, professional experience I had was at Walt Disney,
Hmm.
one of the best brands out there, and I was very fortunate to have one of the best bosses to work for. And the another fun one was MySpace. And it makes me sound old, but MySpace was one of the coolest experiences we had. There were a few things that were really cool about it. One, very fast, very happening, lot
Hmm.
of excitement, the excitement of building a product and putting it in front of 300 million users.
Yeah.
Like this was the time when MySpace was adding like 50 million users over a weekend, and we're figuring
Wow.
out what to do. Well, like we're going and buying servers, and then putting more servers there,
Was
right?
that literally a problem? You guys,
That literally was the
it grew
problem.
so fast. And
it
this is
grew
before
so
AWS. You
fast.
couldn't just spin up more virtual servers,
Yeah,
virtual
this was
machines.
yeah, this we're talking about 2006, 2007 timeframe, right? I joined in 2008 though. At
Right.
that time, I think we had 300 million users, but hands down, one of the most exciting and fun places to be in.
That's great.
And lot of excitement, lot of change, lot of vibrancy. MySpace got bought by Fox, but I think the culture of MySpace was very startup.
Hmm.
It was very fast paced and very happening, and you got to learn so much. I at one point of time I was doing 4 or 5 different areas, or trying 4 to 5 different problems that we were trying to solve, and it was very exciting, very exciting times. But how I got into product, the story goes back a little bit more. I was consulting, and at that time, our customer was AOL,
Okay.
and it's kind of like maybe a lesson from a business perspective, like when a business transforms and transitions, what are some of the challenges to think about. But
Yeah.
my personal story is slightly different. So back then I was a project manager for AOL, project managing it, and we would go and work on projects. At that time AOL was going through their transition from their traditional business, which, if you remember, they used to have those CDs
Right.
about internet and all that.
They just hand them out everywhere. They
Hand
just
it
come in
out
the mail all
everywhere.
the time. Yeah.
You'll get this disc, and obviously that was dying. So they were transitioning from that business to AOL.com.
Okay.
And I think a lot of people were trying to figure out how to build a product on .com, and AOL was trying to figure it out too. I mean, people don't remember, MapQuest was like one of the first map products, digital map products out there,
Oh yeah.
and it was very widely used,
Yeah.
right? And but that was like a realization of how do you go from those heavy AAA maps, physical maps, into something digital like a MapQuest, right? So we were kind of creating those type of projects. We were creating like AOL Mail was there, then AOL.com, MapQuest was there was weather and a bunch of other things that were going on. But this whole transition, every time a company transforms or transitions from a legacy business to a transformation business, a digital business, that's very exciting.
Yeah.
So when we were working on these projects, and I would see that the person who's walking in the room and who's figuring it out is the product manager. He's the one who's talking
Hmm.
about, okay, well, we're going to build this, and this is why we are building it. The why becomes very important, and I think even now I still believe the most important question in product is the why.
Hmm.
And I think somehow it has been drilled into my brain all the way from there. On when you think of a product, before you think about about how to build it, you have to think about why I'm building it. And I think at that time, it just got honed into me that the product managers who were thinking about how to build a product on AOL.com, those are the right questions to ask. And to me, it was super exciting. It was like, okay, that is how I want to live my life. That's the kind of career I want. And even today, like I enjoy the product management aspect of it. I enjoy building products. I enjoy questioning the why and then solving the why and then going forward with it. So that was kind of what opened my eyes to the world of product management. I was not trained, did not have any
Right.
certifications. I was an engineer back then, and I did my MBA from Anderson. But back then, I did not have an official certification into product. But I pretty much knew what I wanted to do, and that was the moment that got me triggered.
What a fascinating time to be in technology. Um, at that transition of the internet, and we had a guest, Elizabeth Alster, who spoke about her experience at launching the NewYorkTimes.com, like uh, these digital worlds where we didn't even know. It's funny because I think MapQuest also came up on another episode that we talked about, where people would it really was that transition to the digital
Yeah,
world where you used to have physical maps, and then you had this thing online you could look at. This is way before phones, if for the younger viewers, younger listeners. But people would tend to print out the directions from MapQuest. So you'd go
yeah,
online and then print them out because you didn't have a smartphone or something that you could use it on in
absolutely.
front of you. But what a fascinating challenge to be in this world of AOL, where they very much were one of the main dominant players of the early internet. But when they started, to your point, they started in a software that was packaged on a CD
Absolutely.
and mailed to you, and you had to install it, and then you had to provide updates via CD. And to be at that transition when they're already the vanguard for a lot of folks in internet connectivity with the chat rooms and the early
Yep.
message boards. That must have been a really exciting time to be around that, be
Yeah,
around in this industry.
absolutely. I mean, I think I got my aha moment there. Um, but my first role into product was at MySpace. So when I joined MySpace, at that time, we were, like I said, it was a very exciting time. There were a lot of products that you could get into. And I was, again, I'd say, like, I think one of the, been lucky that I've had some really good bosses in my career.
Yeah.
We had a VP of product who came from Google, and I think this is also a very transformative time in my career. The way we used to do things at MySpace, like I said, was exciting, but also at the same time very chaotic.
Okay.
It wasn't very disciplined per se, and I
All
would
right.
like, the funny thing about MySpace was, this is cool. I mean, literally, like in every product, the way they would measure the viability of a product in many senses, like you would see in almost every product, the statement would come out, "Oh wow, that's really cool." And that sort of became a benchmark of product,
The
like, okay,
cool factor.
it's cool, right? It's cool, so let's go build it, right?
Yeah.
So when my kind of like the boss I'm talking about, Manu Reiki, he's now a VC in a firm, but I have learned a lot from him.
Wow.
He came from Google, right? And Google, being Google, they're very OKR driven, very disciplined about how you build products, how do you measure build products,
Right.
and how do you create that, right? So he would come and he would ask these questions about, and he literally, I think I remember a moment when he literally, I went to him very excited about a product, and I said, "Look, Manu, I figured this out, and I think this is cool." And he looked at me with a very straight face, and he said, "Sumit, it doesn't matter if you think it's cool. It doesn't matter if I think it's cool. What matters is if our users think it's cool. And unless we have that evidence that our users think it's cool, we don't have anything yet." And I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, right." And that kind of started off the whole kind of discipline, and kind of like my schooling into how do you build products, how do you measure products, how do you write OKRs, and how do you build successful products, right? The discipline of product management actually came when I started having those conversations, when I started kind of building products in a very in a very kind of like a disciplined way, right? So that's kind of like was where I kind of got my schooling,
Yeah.
got my start, and again, still a lot of fun, but this was sort of like even more official, and this was all more disciplined in a way we build products.
When you were at Expedia, and at an executive level for product, did did those learnings trans did they transmit to that role as well?
Yeah, I think so. As I moved my journey from Disney to Expedia, I think again at Disney, it's a very large organization. And I
Right.
think what happens in your career as you move up, you have that maturity comes with the role.
Right.
You learn how to manage people, you learn how to guide people, you learn how to mentor them. So some of the mentorship that I had received from my previous experiences, I was able to mentor other product managers and coach them into how to become better leaders. So there's a lot of maturity that comes with the role, right?
Right.
But there are fundamentals that stay with you,
Mm.
right? Like the fundamental of why is very important for a product manager. That
Yeah.
has stayed with me even today. So when I coach people, I tell them that, look, the why is the more important. And sometimes happens we get so caught up in the organizational stuff, right? Like sometimes the order comes from the top, and you have to do it, and you must do it, right? It's an
Right.
organization, the CEO has decided this has to be done, right? There's a priority. But many times, what I've seen is product managers take that as a gospel and they start running as fast as possible because there are deadlines to meet, because there are things to be done. But if you don't question the why, if you don't ask or clarify the why, you will end up creating mistakes. You will end up not thinking about the holistic aspect of the product. And then you will end up with a product that is based on the order that was executed or that was given to you. Right. So the why has stayed with me. And the second part was the whole discipline story that I told before, is when you look at the way you define your OKRs is very important.
Mm.
The way you define what objectives I'm trying to achieve is very important, right? So that comes again with the discipline and the maturity that you have in this. And I'm not discounting innovation at all. I'm not discounting creativity at all. But as we moved from Disney to Expedia, all these principles stayed with me, and I've kind of communicated that out to the other product managers as well.
Do you have any, learnings you can share about creating OKRs? Best practices or things that you've picked up along the way?
Uh, I think OKRs are pretty simple from a format perspective.
Okay.
I
Right.
think we don't follow that format, or we don't follow the principle truly. For example, a good OKR could be we need to increase the subscription base by 15% by Q3.
Right.
Okay. Your What is your objective? You want to increase your customer acquisition, and how do you quantify that objective? By 15%, and then you have a milestone tied to it by Q3, right? You are defining the objective and you're defining the key result. That's pretty much what it is if you look at the OKR. But many times that specificity doesn't come out. People are not specific enough, and if
Mm,
you're not specific enough, your execution will not be specific, will not be able to meet those objectives, you'll not be able to meet those goals. And I think that's to just to I'm giving a very simplified version of OKRs,
right. Right.
but I think a lot of mistakes happen because we don't even follow that. We just want to play
Mm,
safe, and we don't want to be specific enough. For example, if you end up saying, oh, I'm going to increase the customer base by 15%. And that's it. Well, you didn't put a timeline around it. You didn't specify like by when, right? If you don't have the specificity, then it's a broad based goal that sure, I will increase eventually, but
right.
I'm not putting the specific enough because you want to be in the comfort zone, because OKRs are tied to your performances. OKRs are tied to, how your leadership looks at you. And I think that fear and that risk kind of gets people to not be specific enough. So I think if OKRs are followed in the way they need to be followed, one other important point I will mention is that the OKRs go all the way to the top.
Mm,
So you cannot have one department having a separate OKR and another department having a separate OKR and the organization having a completely separate OKR. So if you are a leader in a product organization, your OKR will be at a much higher level. Your OKR would be something like we are looking to increase our revenues by X million, right?
right.
By this date, by next quarter, will increase by revenue by this one. Now you have, say, 5 teams under you. Those 5 teams have 5 different roles to play. They could be completely different roles, but they all need to be tied to that larger role that the organization is going after, right? So the OKRs have to be translated from the organization cannot have disjointed OKRs. That's effectively what I'm saying,
Yeah.
and that's very important. I'll tell you a very fun problem happens in every organization if we kind of step away from OKRs. The number one problem that organization faces is prioritization,
Right.
because typically when you go, and this has happened to me a few times in my career, where we go and I think this was like my first month into Expedia, and we had 3 different leaders from engineering, product, and then another role. And we would go and say, okay, let's start about road mapping. Okay, what are the priorities? Well, here's list one, here's list two, list three. And we were like, wait a second, how can there be 3 different lists with 3 priority ones?
right.
That's probably something is wrong there. And maybe we should go back and we should build one list which has one priority, which says number one, number two, number three,
Yeah.
rather than having 3 different lists. And I think it happens in every organization, right? And I think that was probably my second day on the job, and I was like, I'm going to lose my job because I'm going to questioning the people over there. But no, and they were like, nope, absolutely right. Like let's figure this out. And then the outcome was that we had one list to work on, right? And I think that's fundamental, right? If your objectives are clear, and again it goes back to the leadership, your
Right.
objectives are clear, your key results are clear, then the rest of the team can follow and can drive the mission forward. That kind of avoids any confusion, any lack of clarity, which is super, super, super critical.
That's fantastic. Yeah, really appreciate your take on OKRs, and the experience you've had is it's helpful for our listeners to get those tips and tricks. So thank you for sharing that. Love to ground this back in Los Angeles, and bring it back to figuring out, what's the most LA thing that's happened to you. It could be tech related or not.
Yeah. No, so I actually, for a brief moment, I was visiting Honest offices, if you know
Okay,
Honest,
the Honest Company
Honest
with
company,
Jessica Alba. Yeah,
Jessica Alba. And one of my friends was CTO over there, and we worked at MySpace together, so he was the CTO there at Honest Company, and I would go meet him quite often for lunch and all that. And their offices were not like super big, but the parking was small,
right.
and they had three designated spots, and one spot was Jessica Alba's spot.
Oh, that's awesome.
So when I'm going to pick him up, and guess what you do when you are waiting for somebody, you're on your phone, right? So I'm
Right.
not caring about anybody else. I'm literally in Jessica Alba's spot, and I'm on the phone doing my own thing. And then on the periphery of my eye, I noticed that there is a car waiting, and guess who that person was? It was Jessica Alba, and obviously she had that look on her face, which made me kind of like apologize from the window several times
Yeah.
and move my car immediately. And I was like, oh, geez, that's not how I wanted to, have an interaction with Jessica Alba. But then I think we had like a couple of things going on at Honest Company. I've seen her, Jessica. I haven't interacted with her per se, but the culture of Honest Company, the vibe of the Honest Company,
Yeah.
I think is amazing, and I think goes back to how Jessica Alba and all the leadership has built the culture around it. So I had a little bit of like that celebrity, oh my god, experience right there. Not the best story, the
No, that's
best
a
way to
great
interact,
story.
but
That's a very LA story. Oftentimes you're on your phone, not really paying attention. Yeah, you could be in anyone's space anywhere. It's just kind of funny that you look up and like there's Jessica Alba behind the steering wheel, like waiting for you to get out of her space. So
yeah.
that's phenomenal. Well, thank you so much, Sumeet. It was amazing to hear your story. Really appreciate you coming down here. Also like to thank our sponsors, PMALA and Unida. I'd like to thank you all for listening to us. If you like what you hear, please smash that subscribe button. Thank you for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.